Damn it. I am so weak. But I can get stronger. I will get stronger. I will become worthy to stand by her side. To be by my goddess's side. I will be the hero for them. Bel thought, tears falling down his cheeks as he once again dashed to the dungeon. He still had no armor, and one of his knives were completely shattered, but this didn't deter him. It only made him want to go even more, in order to be able to fight even if he was lacking armor or half of his weapons. With this fierce determination, Bel disappeared into the dungeon. So, you decided without us present to bring in someone into your familiar? Asked Finn, looking over at Loki, who looked back at Finn. It is my familiar and my choice on whether or not I want someone in it. While I would have said something to you, it is still my choice. I wanted him and he needed me. I do not need to ask permission. Loki said, frowning a bit at her captain. I worded that poorly. I would never tell you not to bring someone in, but you could have at the very least stopped him from entering the dungeon until we were back. It is our responsibility to make sure that anyone is ready for the dungeon. What would have happened if he got killed just now? Loki deflated and nodded. I know. It wasn't meant to be this way. Just this kid is. Loki sighed. When I found him, he was just exiting the dungeon. Foulness. He also had good stats just starting out. He's stubborn as hell, and it wouldn't have mattered if I told him no dungeon. He would have done so. He has this crazy idea to be a hero. I'm sorry to have worried you. Loki admitted. It was serious this time. What's done is done. Reveria commented. The question now is, what do we do with the situation we are in now? She glanced up at Bet, who was tied up above the table. He just ran out and it wasn't in the direction of the manor. She calmly stated. Loki blinked before looking at Reveria. What direction? Loki asked calmly, getting a little nauseous. He wouldn't. The dungeon is in that direction, and with all the talk about him being weak. Reveria trailed off. Tiona immediately stood up. There's no way he'd be so stupid. He just got done being beaten up by a Minotaur. No way he would just rush back in there. The Amazon claimed, but Loki stood up. That is exactly where he is going. He might be new, but I just know he's going there. Tiona, Reveria. Please bring him back. Loki replied, very seriously. Now? She ordered. She didn't even look at Finn, making a decision as the goddess of the familiar. Tiona didn't need to be told twice. She was already running to the direction of the dungeon, though Reveria had stayed behind to look between Loki and Finn before she sighed, shook her head and walked off, heading towards the dungeon. She would deal with Loki later. Finn looked over at the goddess. I'm sure Mr. Cranel will be all right. He tried to placate his goddess. We'll bring him back safely, and we'll make sure he's brought into this familiar right. He'll be a proper adventurer. I've already made my own plans regarding him. I've already gotten him some weapons, as well as his first party member. They are supposed to meet tomorrow and see if they can work together, but tonight may be putting that on a postponement. Loki admitted, before taking a seat with a sigh. It was going to be a long night. Bel stood at the 5th floor, right where he had nearly lost his life and where he was saved. He stared intensely at the same spot where he laid helplessly, accepting his death. Never again. Never again will I ever be like this. Ever? I will never allow myself to be saved. Never allow myself to be weak again. I will be worthy of my goddess and of Tiona. I will be a hero. He swore to himself, before he turned and made his way through the 5th floor, which was mostly empty. He stood before the 6th floor, never having reached it. With a deep breath, he began to take the steps down. Deep in the dungeon, on floor 21, a rumble and a crack was heard through an empty part of the dungeon. A monster was being born. Falling from the rock, this monster fell to its knees, long hair shadowing its body. It was a female monster. Slowly standing up, the body of this monster was very humanoid. Minotaurs also had a semi-humanoid body, but this monster was much more human in build. Long slender legs, a slim waist, a bountiful chest. Long silver blue hair reaching her waist, a red gem on its forehead. Pointy ears, almost like that of an elf. Amber-colored eyes. Many scales placed randomly on her body. No clothing adorned her body. What is? Where am I? The monster girl spoke, as she looked around. The dungeon is a strange place. Tiona and Reveria reached the 3rd floor, following a trail of monster drops and crystals. Reveria was the first to speak her mind, regarding this. The fact that he's level 1 and already going through all of these floors at this speed. Something about this boy isn't settling well with me. The elf spoke. Tiona followed up with another observation. The amount of monster loot is ridiculous too. I have never once seen this amount of loot on a single floor. Belle is amazing, she said, a smile forming on her face out of pure excitement. Belle was looking cooler and cooler to the younger Hiryute sister. Come, we need to move faster, Reveria said, before they started to jog through the dungeon, following the trail that Belle left behind. Belle wasn't all that injured. There were a few scratches along his right arm, while his left hand was a bit damaged. His chest was untouched as was his back, though there was a nasty cut on his forehead, though he had a strip of his shirt wrapped around it to stem the bleeding. Breathing hard, Belle looked around him. He was surrounded. Wall shadows. Wall shadows were known as the first newbie killer. Spawning only on the 6th floor, this monster was humanoid in shape and form, with long arms and 3 knife-like claws. With a growl, the monsters began to close in, but Belle wasn't having it. Get out of my way! Belle roared in fury, taking out the last of his chains. He had lost the one on his left arm earlier on the 6th to the stomach of a frog shooter. He flicked his blade into the air with his left hand, swinging the chain with his right in an arc. The tip caught the knife by its handle, during its path, which sent the blade slicing through one of the wall shadows that had come up on his left. Swinging the chain round and round like a wheel, he used the momentum building up before shooting it out behind him. The knife embedded itself in the forehead of the next shadow beast. It stayed stuck like that, groaning, before Belle flicked his wrist. The knife ripped out of the shadow's head, sending it to the grave before Belle grabbed onto his knife as the chain retracted back to his arm. There were a good 7 left and they were closing the circle, keeping Belle pinned in place. Closing his eyes, Belle took a deep breath, the chain beginning to swing again like a wheel. This was Belle's adventure, and he was determined to make it out alive, stronger and better than ever. Tiona stopped, staring at the same spot Belle was at earlier. Where the Minotaur almost took his life, and where she met him for the first time. Reveria came over and looked at the ground. You all right? Just This is where Belle first was. I dunno. It's silly. Let's go. Tiona said, shaking her head to get the cobwebs out before they once again gave chase. In the dirt was the footprints of an adventurer, who had obviously stood there for some time. Dashing down the stairs, following the trail of crystals, Tiona and Riveria ended up in the narrow tunnel that started on this floor, but they turned the corner into the wide spacious cavernous hallway that extended out. They both stopped as they spotted their target. It was Belle and he was in the zone. Tiona was about to move forward to give assistance, but Riviera put her hand out and kept Tiona back. As much as I would like to step in, I want to see what he can do. See him for my own eyes, see what Loki might see in him. I also think he would not appreciate us right now. If he gets badly hurt, then we step in to save him. The elf spoke. Tiona nodded, though she still wanted to get in there. She didn't want to see Belle hurt. The shadows attacked. Belle grunted and leapt to his left as one came right for his face with a swipe. The leap to his left sent him closer to another, but the swinging blade and chain cleaved it in two with an uppercut. He ducked underneath a swipe from another to his right, taking the blade with him as he swung it behind his back, the blade and chain going from a vertical spin to a horizontal. The blade took off the hand of the shadow, before slicing another across the throat, that was to his left. The one to the left burst into ash, just like the one that he had cleaved in two, leaving 6 behind, though one of them was missing a hand. Taking this opportunity to get some distance, he leapt backwards through the opening he made as he continued swinging the blade round and round, this time going across the shoulders every so often. With a deep breath and calmness, Belle moved forward, swinging the blade and chain in an arc horizontally, aiming for the throat of the shadow that he had made into an amputee. The shadow in question raised his razor shadow claws, blocking Belle's blade, sending the chain into a spiral, as it lost all of its momentum. With a flick of his wrist, the chain retracted as Belle rushed in, aiming to gain advantage since the shadow had its arms up. With the chain retracting, Belle gripped the blade and dived in, sending the blade deep into the chest of the wall shadow. Ah! Belle roared, lifting the blade up, cleaving the shadow's head in two, sending it into an ashy grave. Belle took a swipe to the face, his right cheek taking a razor-sharp attack before Belle had the sense to back away with a leap. He reached up to touch his cheek, seeing how it was bleeding quite profusely, despite it not being super deep. He hissed in pain, but had to focus as 3 shades pushed forward, with 2 in the rearguard. His eyes widened at the assault, leaving Belle on the defensive. Once more, the chain and blade came out, Belle swinging it around his body, using it to parry and block the wall shadows, leaping backwards, sideways and even over them. Belle's agility was his greatest attribute, as well as his dexterity, due to his skill with his weapon. Not that there was much skill, for the shadows got through the blade. A swipe to his stomach later, Belle was kneeling and hunched over, clutching his gut as he began to bleed. The claws didn't get too deep into his body, but it hurt. Belle? You must not ever give up. Stay fighting and stay focused. Allowing yourself to cave into the pain paves the way into failure and death. Even if the pain is severe, you must always get up and fight, for no woman wants a man who falls and remains laying on the ground. Get up. Belle, he heard his grandfather tell him. He stopped reminiscing memories of the past. Belle hissed and stood up, gripping the blade tightly in his right hand. Your body is small. It won't ever be strong like Hercules. But there is one thing that you do have, and that is speed, your stature, and mobility. Use your mobility to your advantage. Footwork, Bell. Footwork. Bell once again heard his grandfather before Bell charged in, blade pointed backwards. The shadows began to move as well, charging at Bell. Bell dodged to the left of the first shadow, then to the right of the next, dodging side to side, before going straight for the one in the back, the one that wasn't prepared. He sliced the shadow's throat, cleaving the head off with a single attack. Noticing a dropped shadow claw, Bell flipped the blade into the other hand before charging again, repeating the same strategy. Dodge side to side, duck and weave in between before this time sending the blade up, right through the chin, and out the back of the skull. Using the momentum of surprise, he flung his chain out, going right in between two of the shadows before latching onto the dropped claw. Flicking his wrist, the chain retracted and sent the claw flying, impaling the closest shadow right in the back of the head, sending it down to its death. Two shadows remained. Wow, he's so cool. Look at him, Reveria. Look at him. He's like whoosh whoosh. Dodging and then bam. Reveria. He's so cool. I'm excited to have him in the familiar. Tiona said, bouncing on her feet as she watched the newbie adventurer take on a challenging fight. Reveria nodded. He's reckless, impulsive, has very little training, but he can think on his feet and utilizes his strengths to minimize his weaknesses. He has potential, though I foresee him being an absolute handful to manage, she admitted before focusing on the fight. Two shadows remained and Bell was ready. He took out his chain, attaching his blade to the end. He began to swing it again vertically, gaining momentum before he charged forward, meeting the shadows who charged at him as well. Leaping into the air, his chain and blade still twirling, his blade began slashing and grinding away at the shadows on their backs, tops of their heads and their shoulders. It wasn't anything fatal, but it gave him some breathing room as they screeched in pain. He landed on the ground behind them before swinging the blade in a horizontal arc, aiming lower to the ground where they couldn't protect themselves with their hands very well. Slicing both of them in the backs of their ankles, he sent the shadows to their knees before darting forward. Bell realized something about his style of fighting. The chain and blade allowed for great range, maneuvers and crowd control, but it had flaws. It wasn't as lethal as getting in close, stabbing and slashing. Any sort of bash to the blade would make the blade useless for a time, giving openings to Bell. As well as if anyone should grab onto the chain, it would force Bell to be a slave to the enemy due to them being able to fling him around. Retracting the chain back to his forearm, Bell rushed forward, blade in his right hand. He dodged a very slow haymaker from the one to the left, moving to the right before stabbing the blade right into the face of the other shadow, killing it. He yanked the blade out, using this momentum to block and redirect the shadow's claws of its right hand outwards, leaving the shadow wide opened. Stopping that momentum, he flipped the blade around in his hand and stabbed down, sending the blade right into the top of the shadow's head. As soon as the blade entered the shadow's body, the blade snapped in two right at the hilt. The shadow disappeared into ash and all the adrenaline pumping through the boy's veins disappeared. Nearly falling to his knees, Bell refused to kneel, his legs shaking as he slowly stood up. It was then he noticed that he was bleeding even worse from his stomach. All that movement opened the wound further, but he refused to falter. He finally stood tall, but the blood loss and pain was too much and he passed out. Standing up. Yeah. You go there, rabbit. Show them who's boss. Tiona yelled out, seeing Bell end the lives of the two remaining shadows. She and Reveria both moved out from their hidden rocky outcropping. Approaching Bell, who was standing with his eyes wide open, but there was no light in them. Reveria stood in front of him now while Tiona grabbed his shoulders. It's a mind zero. Well, not exactly. He just used up too much energy fighting consistently. He'll be fine though. You want me to carry him? She asked her companion, who shook her head. Absolutely not. I got this. Reveria. Did you see his fight? Oh, he was just like one of those heroes from the stories. Oh, it was so cool. Let's get going back to the manor. We got much to deal with. Reveria said, rushing out of the dungeon with Tiona in tow. About half an hour later, Bel was placed down on Loki's bed. He was face down with his shirt off, still passed out from their time. Loki, Finn, Tiona and Reveria were the only ones present at the time. What were you thinking? Loki exclaimed, pacing up and down in the room as she rubbed her head. She was worried sick, and now she finds out that they just let him fight. Gah! I wanted to see what we were working with. Tiona and I were ready to step in at any time. The boy is safe, calm down. Reveria said, crossing her arms. Now get to his status. Let's see what we've got to work with. Loki stared Reveria down, before sighing in defeat. She climbed onto Bel's back before pricking her finger with a needle, allowing a drop of divine blood to spill across his back, lighting up his blessing crest. Child, Bel Cranel. Familiar, Loki. Strength, 5I101H. Endurance, 10I300F. Dexterity, 3I258G. Agility, 14I504D. Magic, 050I. Skills. Liaris Freeze. Fast growth as long as the user is in love. The strength of the effects corresponds with the level of the user's feelings. As a side effect, it makes the user immune to charms. Rabbit's Foot. Increased luck. Experience gain and increased monster drops, as well as increased probability. Spells, unknown. Has potential. Reveria and Loki stared slack-jawed at his back. Are you kidding me? Loki exclaimed, falling backwards off of Bel's back, while Reveria was frozen. Finn moved forward towards Reveria. Is something the matter? Is he stunted? The Prum asked, referring to his growth. No. Not even close. Loki, get that sheet out for Finn. This. I don't know what to say. Oh. Let me look. I wanna see what the hero has. Tiona asked, bouncing around a bit in excitement. Loki climbed up and quickly began copying Bel's status to a parchment, before handing it to Finn. Finn's eyes widened though his jaw remained fixed in place. He looked down at Bel and frowned. We need to keep this in here. If this gets out of this familiar. Finn said slowly. We mustn't tell him of this. He can know that he is just getting stronger faster, but, no. This rabbit's foot ability, the Liaris Freeze, and not to mention he gained the potential for magic. He'll be someone to kill for. Not to mention, the stat increase from just a few days. I understand he's been through some rough patches, but this amount of increase is insane. Finn said, biting his thumb that was throbbing. We need to keep him safe, in the dungeon and out. You said you had already made plans. He asked, looking at the goddess. I've went to Hephaestus and got a few weapons made for him. I also spoke to her, and with a discount, I agreed to let one of her rising stars and Belle form a party should they hit it off. What else can we do? She asked seriously, staring at her captain. He needs training. He needs to get a bigger party too. We need to encourage him to grow his group to make it as safe as possible. Maybe forbid him to go further. Reveria asked, speaking up. No good. Loki said. Forbidding him will only make him do it more. It's not like we can stop him physically from going deeper. She admitted, crossing his arms. I also don't think I can punish him myself for it. His desire to grow stronger, his desire for love. If I hamper that, I don't want to think what could happen. Finn nodded. Then the best we can do is to keep him geared, stocked up with potions, train him and make sure he is well advised. I believe he has a guild advisor, right? Yeah, it's that half-elf Aina. She's the one who set me up with Belle. Loki said with a nod. Well, for now, we let him sleep and see about getting him with that party member to start. I'll work on a training regimen. Finn said, before making his way to the exit. He then stopped and tossed the parchment to Tiona. None of that information leaves this room unless further instructed. He told Tiona, before leaving. Reveria glanced down at Belle before sighing and shaking her head. She also walked out of the room, but didn't stop or say anything. Tiona, on the other hand, had wide eyes in surprise. Whoa! How is he so strong? Wait! He is doing this for love. Looks like it. I'm not sure who he is in love with, though I have a hunch. She said, though she muttered the last bit. She didn't want to get involved with Belle's affections for Tiona, or at least that's who she assumed he was attracted to. Come. Let's let him get some rest. We can see him when he wakes up. Loki said, gesturing for Tiona to follow. Tiona nodded after tearing up the stat sheet, leaving Belle in the dark room. Belle was going to be a hero.